Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Monday, March 7th. This is going to be, I'm going to try to be brief here because I got to get to work, but I'm actually reading through my apostles' teaching and just doing, another check for just grammar and commas and just seeing if it can be a little bit better readable. But it actually flows really well. I read for about an hour, and I read half of Matthew in about an hour, so you could read all of Matthew in about 2 hours, I think. But I came across a new teaching as I was walking through the parable of the seed and the sower. So if you guys have read my book and understood how I interpret the parables of the seed and the sower and the 7 letters to Revelation, I interpret them as a prophetic panorama of both the history of Israel and the history of the church. Well, I kind of looked at it with a new set of eyes today, and I realized it's also a second witness to the history of the world. So if any of you have seen my teaching on how the 7 days of creation map out the history of the world over 7,000 years, the kingdom parables do as well, and I want to show you this. This is really cool. So it's all symbolic. Obviously, you guys have to kind of look at it with prophetic eyes and think about the types and symbols here. But let's look at these 7 kingdom parables in order and show how that details the 7,000 years of church history. Of world history. Okay. So first of all, we know the parable of the seed and the sower is about the 4 types of people who are going to hear the word. So the main point of the parable of the seed and sower is that the same word gets planted in people, and they're going to respond to it in different ways. Now, the first real division between whether or not somebody bears fruit is based on how they receive the word. And of course, the first 2 people are Adam and Eve. And Adam receives the word, but he doesn't receive it with sincerity. So he apparently adds to it, because when Eve hears the word about taking from the tree, Adam does the exact same thing the Pharisees would do, which he assumes it's some inherent property in the fruit, and so he says, if you even touch it, you die, because that's what Eve says to Satan. Now we know Adam was taught that, and this is again, your pastors are going to argue, but listen, Adam was taught that before Eve was created. Adam was taught not to eat of the fruit. There's nothing that says God returned and then retaught it to Eve. So we can't assume that Eve was the one who invented the extra thing. It had to be Adam, because Adam would have been the one to have taught her. God never taught Eve. And this is the whole thing about women being under male authority and men being teachers of women and women not being teachers of men. It goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. God taught Adam. Then he gave Adam a wife, and the expectation was for Adam to teach the wife what he knew. So Adam taught Eve, and he apparently added, don't even touch it lest you die. And what he did is he transferred the death penalty of the fruit, not to disobeying God, but to the fruit itself. Well, the Pharisees do the same thing, and that's why they accuse Jesus based on eating with unwashed hands, because God gave them all these food laws to kind of multiply the not eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the teaching element, which Jesus exposes later on, is that it is to guard what comes out of your mouth. And so he gave them this law for, about 1,500 years to guard what comes into your mouth, as a way of later teaching them to guard what comes out of your mouth. And that's really important. So clean or unclean things coming out of your mouth. And then he goes on to teach how what comes out of the mouth from the heart defiles the man. So your words defile. Okay. Well, the Pharisees had the same error as Adam, and so the Pharisees taught that it's, eating clean or unclean things must be, what defiles you spiritually. And so they added to that, then you should wash your hands before you eat, just in case you've accidentally touched something unclean and be defiled. And then they would look at you as defiled just for eating with unwashed hands after that, which they added to the law because they missed the whole purpose. The whole purpose is about knowingly eating, not unknowingly eating. Okay, which is why Paul will go on after the apostles are going to talk about eating meat sacrificed to idols, and Paul says, don't even worry about it. Don't even ask about it. If you know it's from an idol, don't eat it. But don't ask. Because it's about knowingly eating something that's defiled, or what God commands us not to eat. And the apostles' command to not eat meat sacrificed to idols was a command, just like the command not to eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, just like the Jews' command not to eat unclean foods. But the apostles reduced that all to what was based in the Noahic code, which is don't eat things sacrificed to idols, and blood, which is right in the Noahic code, which is to all the nations. Okay, and then Paul reduces that down to don't knowingly eat. So don't even ask. Okay? Because it's the whole point about the testimony you give. It's not, there's no magical power in the food. Okay? So what's the point? The point is they both received the word, but they both received it differently. And that's what happens in the seed and the sower. You have people who claim belief in the gospel, but they receive it like a magic token and not into their hearts to change them, but into their minds to basically get their free ticket to heaven and then go on living the way they want to live anyway. And so Jesus talks about these two types. These, for the love of riches, don't produce fruit. If you read Hebrews 6, they're going to be burned. And then these who fall away, who claim Christ and then eventually stop claiming Christ because they're like, wait. I didn't know I was supposed to suffer for Christ. Screw this. I'm not worthy of this suffering. Until they realize that Jesus suffered and he called us to share in the fellowship of his sufferings. And blessed are you if you're hated for his name's sake. They don't want that because at the end of the day, they think they're worthy of salvation. See, Jesus was worthy of perfection, and yet he suffered for our sakes. And he's saying, if you love me, you'll also suffer for the sake of those I'm trying to heal. You will be one of the 99 who are fine with being left alone while I go for the one. If your heart is changed by the gospel, but their hearts aren't changed, so they fall away. So what you have is people receiving the word, but misapplying it based on their own lust and pride, which is what Adam does. He misapplies the gospel. And then we see Adam's pride come out because when God comes up to Adam and say, did you eat of the tree of the knowledge which I told you not to do? Adam gives a smart ass answer. Well, the woman that you gave me, and it's like Spider-Man when Tony Stark tells him, I thought I told you not to come with us. And he says, well, technically the suit was really intuitive. And so it's technically your fault. He does exactly what Adam does with God. Okay. And he goes to Eve, he gives her an open-ended answer, says, Eve, what did you do? And she said, the absolute truth. The serpent deceived me and I ate. Absolute truth. And so God makes the first division there for the seed to come through Eve and not Adam. So this is your parable of the seed and sower division. Eve produces fruit, Adam produces death. Okay? Which is why Adam's judgment is he's going to work and toil, that's works religion, until he dies. Eve's sentence is that she has to submit to Adam, just like the Jews were told to submit to the Pharisees, do everything that they do, but not with their heart. Everything that they tell you to do, and not with their heart. We're supposed to submit to the legal rulers around us, but not with their heart. They're evil, but we're still supposed to submit to their commands in the name of Christ. Okay. We give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God. We give God our heart, and we give Caesar our temporal obedience. Okay. So Eve is called to submit to Adam. This is where all your rules about women submitting to men come from, is Eve submitting to Adam. It's the same as a man having to submit to the unjust king. Jesus submitting to Tiberius Caesar and Pontius Pilate, even though he was God over them. Okay, women, just accept that. That is a mark of a true believer, is submitting to authority even when the authority is unjust. Okay, and the seed of Eve, remember, the children of Eve, it says in Timothy, it says, she will be saved through childbearing. He's talking about Eve. She'll be saved through the bearing of Christ. And her children, if they continue in, truth and sobriety. I forget exactly what it says. But the point is, Eve's children are us. We're the children of Eve, the mother of all the living. Adam is the father of all the dying. Okay, so then he says to Eve, he says, the seed's going to come through him. He's going to crush your serpent, but she has to submit to that unjust authority. Okay, so Eve bears fruit, Adam doesn't. Okay, there's through seed and the sower parable. So now we're going to go for the next one. What's the next parable? It's the wheat and the tares. So the man sows good seed, but while he slept, the enemies came and sowed tares, and the wheat departed. Now, the wheat and the tares is Cain and Abel. Okay, and Cain and Abel's descendants in the second 1,000 years, produce what leads to the flood. Okay, and so Cain's descendants are going to bear fruit. Ultimately it's going to lead to Noah and his descendants, but they're mostly all going to get killed off. down to Noah and his family. Cain's descendants are going to produce no good fruit, and they're actually going to actually have the Nephilim inbreed. So they're going to have the angels inbreed. So that's tares being sowed among the wheat. Satan is actually sowing seed in the earth. In the literal biblical sense, he's making children and offspring in the earth, and they're among the wheat. So that's the second millennium, okay? And so rather than pluck them out, because remember, these Nephilim are half human, half hybrids. Noah actually ultimately marries Nama, which is a descendant of Cain, according to Hebrew tradition. So Nama is, there's actually multiple Hebrew traditions. One says Noah marries Nama, and that's why Nama is mentioned in the Bible, because otherwise she'd be irrelevant. The other is that he married this other woman, Amzara, and that's if you go to the Ark Encounter. That's where you'll learn there. These are two different Hebrew traditions, okay? I believe the one that he married Nama, because every woman that is mentioned in the Bible is significant. That's why there's not a lot of women mentioned in the Bible. And she is only mentioned because she is brought into Noah. And this is important because that means the seed of Cain's line is still saved in the ark through Amzara, which is why you have people reestablish basically all the occult stuff that came from Cain. And if you read the book of Jubilees, it says Canaan. His name is actually Canaan, Cainan. So he's named after Cain. He's in the line of Shem, and he's a son of Arphaxad, and he basically reinvigorates the pre-flood occult stuff at Babylon, which is why he's in the ancestry in Luke, but he's not in the ancestry in Genesis. The Jews take him out because he's cursed. Okay. So Canaan, who's actually named after Cain, reinvigorates the stuff at Babylon, which is going to be why the Babylonians adopt Nimrod as their ruler. Nimrod is basically a 13th and youngest bastard son of Cush, the oldest of Ham. And then whoever his wife is, it wouldn't shock me if she's a daughter of Canaan. I don't know exactly where his wife comes from. But they built the Tower of Babel. So again, all this is in the second 1,000 years, okay? Now, in the third 1,000 years, you have Abraham brought out, okay? And Abraham is, remember, he's going to be the least of all nations. He separates them from his father's house. So the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard, which a man took and sowed in his field, which is the least of all seeds. But when grown, it's become the greatest of herbs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches of it. So what is this? This is the house of Abraham. The house of Abraham starts as the smallest nation and becomes the greatest nation, because it's ultimately the church. It's Christ, it's the church, it's Israel. Everything is Abraham's seed, and now ultimately becomes the biggest. And the birds of the air lodging in it. This is the demons who now want to be part of this powerhouse, because that's the children of Abraham. So this is another parable he placed alongside it. A kingdom of heaven is similar to a woman who took to hide in 3 measures of meal until the whole was leavened, okay? So this 1,000 years is going to extend from Abraham to David, okay? It ends with David. This, the woman corrupting it until the whole thing is leavened, is basically from David down to the time of the Pharisees, okay? So what happened is the kingdom of David gets utterly corrupted. The whole is leaven. Remember, leaven corrupts bread. Learn about leaven and the properties of leaven. It always means sin in the Bible. What it does, this is exactly what leaven does. It eats the bread. It's a bacteria that eats the bread and basically farts it out, and that's what makes a bread leaven and rise. So it reduces the substance of the bread, increases the appearance of the bread, but ultimately it's a corruption of the bread, and it takes away from its substance, okay? That's why you're better off eating whole grain than you are eating leavened bread. It's just better for your body. There's more substance to it. So leavened bread it means corruption. So the whole kingdom was corrupted. So from the time of David down to the Pharisees, the kingdom of Israel seems like it's doing good. It has a prominent and notable place in the Roman Empire because it's on the border of them and the Parthian Empire, and it needs to be strong and robust and wealthy in order that it not be taken over by the Parthians, and then the Parthians would have Mediterranean Sea access and compete with Rome for the Mediterranean Sea. Okay. So that's how the kingdom is leavened. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, and if you know the history, and this is all my apostles' teaching, the Pharisees were basically a Babylonian Talmudic sect of Jews who took over the interpretation of the Bible. The Talmud is utterly demonic. It's full of it's full of like basically studies from rabbis. It's not like everything in it is evil, but the fact that they used it to supersede the law and the apostles and ultimately condemn Christ, that's all in the Talmud, shows the Talmud throw off the whole book. Jesus, that is the Pharisees' version of the New Testament, basically. The New Testament is the apostles' version of the Talmud, okay, which is the authority to bind and loose, which is to interpret the Old Testament, okay. So that's the epitome of its corruption. Now check this out, okay. The next 2 days are going to be the spreading of the gospel. So what are the next 2 days? I'm sorry, we're at past the parables. This is a treasure hidden in the field and a merchant seeking good pearls, okay? So he sells all the things that he has and he goes and buys that field, okay? Now this is awesome. So the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man which he finds hides, and for the joy of it sells all the things and buys the field. Now this is awesome. Throughout history, since the Jews were dispersed from the land of Israel, they were not allowed to buy land, okay? Only Gentiles could buy land. So the Gentiles, the man who buys the field is not a Jew. He's a Gentile, okay? That's all of history, okay? Now look at this. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant man seeking good pearls, okay? What did the Jews become because they couldn't buy land? They became merchants. And who come into the kingdom last? The Jews, okay? So just like in the two parts, you have the sea animals, which is the Gentiles, and then the land animals. You have Gentiles, then Jews coming into the kingdom. You have the two, okay? So finally, after the 2,000 years are done, what happens last? The millennium. And the millennium is Christ ruling, and it ultimately ends with Satan trying to make people actually attack Christ in person. And then that's the destruction of fire, okay? So what does it say? Kingdom of heaven is like a net casting the sea and gathering from every kind, okay? This is literally every ethnos, every nation, okay? So Jesus is over every nation. He casts it out over the whole world. It says, and when it is full, they draw it to the shore and sit down and gather the good into vessels, but the worthless cast the worthless out. What are the vessels? Those are the new heavenly bodies we get. And the worthless are cast out into the lake of eternal fire. So shall it be at the consummation of the age. The angels will come forth and separate the wicked from among the righteous and cast them into the furnace of fire. And in that place will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's hell. This is the end of the age, okay? This is actual hell. This is the end of the 7,000 years. And Jesus said to them, will you consider this? And they say, yes, Lord. And then he said to them, every scribe discipled in the kingdom of heaven is like a man who is a household, bringing forth out of his treasure new and old. That's New Testament and Old Testament, okay? He's basically saying he's bringing out of his treasure things that were hidden from the foundation of the world and things that are now just being revealed, okay? So he's telling you, he's giving them how to become basically the apostles and be the scribes who interpret the kingdom of heaven. Okay, now check this out. This is how this caught me, okay? Now, my original teaching on the 7,000 years being the 7,000 years of history started with me reading Isaiah, where he says he declares the end from the beginning. So I said he literally had to have declared the end from the beginning, if that's true. And that's how I found that in the book of Genesis. But watch what Jesus says here. He says, so the disciples came forward, and he said to him, why do you speak to them in parables? He responded then, saying to them, because it is granted to you to know the mystery of the kingdom of heaven, but to them is not granted. For whoever has, to him it shall be given, and he shall have an abundance. But whoever does not have, from him it shall be taken away what he has. So what is given? The Pharisees were given the law, but they don't want to obey the law, so the law is taken away from them. Okay? And for those who keep the law, they're going to get more. And the more is the new covenant. It's the better covenant. Okay? So those who keep the law get the better covenant. Those who don't keep the law get even the law taken away from them. They don't even have that. The sacrificial system's gone. Jerusalem is destroyed. He says, because of this, I speak to them in parables. He's talking about the Pharisees and the unbelieving Jews. Because though seeing, they do not perceive, and though hearing, they do not listen, nor do they not consider. For this people's heart has become calloused and their ears dull of hearing. This is all right in Isaiah, okay? and their eyes are closed, lest at any time they perceive with their eyes and hear with their ears and consider with their hearts and be converted, and I might heal them. I'm surprised I didn't quote that. I have to do that. So I'll have to quote that in the next edition that comes out. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they listen. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous have longed to perceive what you hear, and have not perceived, and longed to hear what you have not heard. Okay? Now listen to what he says later on. He says this. All of these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables, and without a parable he did not speak to them, to fulfill what was spoken through the prophets. This is in Psalms. I will open my mouth in parables to utter that kept secret from the founding of the world. Okay? So that kept secret is what God hid in a mystery in the founding of the world, Genesis 1. He's literally giving them an exposition on Genesis 1 as the 7,000 years of church history. And so what do you have? You have basically 4,000 years of dividing and distinguishing. You have 2,000 years of treasure being found, which is the gospel. And then you have the final day, which is where the division between the righteous and the wicked unto heaven and hell takes place. Those in vessels are giving new bodies, and those without the vessels are cast into eternal hellfire. So there's your 7,000 years of church history. So anyways, I hope you guys are blessed by this teaching. Have a great Monday, and keep me lifted up in prayer if you do. For those of you friends, I'm going to be down in Virginia Beach on the 12th. I will be able to hang out as early as probably the 14th. I'm going to be test driving some cars, but I'll be there to hang out. So if you guys want to make plans between the 14th and the 18th, I will prioritize that. So you know who you are, and you guys be blessed, and have a great week. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.